Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Lumineers Quest podcast, where we talk everything Lorcana. I'm Zach.
And I'm Jacob.
Whoa! And thanks for coming on this journey with us.
I wanted to change it up just a little bit.
He threw that curveball at me without letting me know, and so that is hilarious. Thank you for making that fun. Okay, everyone. Yeah, so in today's episode, quick preview, we are doing a updated, view / evolution of the inks and how their identity has changed a little bit over the couple chapters that we're in now, and how things are looking now, and kind of how each of them play and their identities, and again how that has morphed, pun intended, over the past couple months. So I think this should be fun because, especially for us, when we were coming in, we were very newbie, and so we had a very specific view on some of these, and I think they've changed a ton. Given some of the new tools that have been brought out, but also just understanding how to interact with them a little bit better. I think that we'll talk about the inks, and hopefully if people are kind of contemplating on what to play, this will help give you some ideas like what inks are best for what and why they are that way, and we'll go from there. So let's get into it. And as always, like we like to start, we like to thank everyone for the support and the appreciation that everyone shows us, and all of the interaction that we get from the community. It's been a fantastic ride so far. If you're listening to the audio version of this on any of the major podcast networks like Apple, iHeart, or Spotify, or any of the above, we also have a YouTube channel where you can watch our unboxings and tier lists and stuff and actually get the video behind it. We also have a Twitter where you can follow us at LorcanaPod, ask us any questions there, or you can email us at lorcanapod@gmail.com. And lastly, if you want to support the podcast, the best way to do so is through our TCG Player affiliate link, which you can find in the description box below, wherever you're listening to this. And so with that said, let's go ahead and get into it. I know Jake's got a fun card of the day, and so I'm gonna jump to that one because we were talking about it a minute ago, and I think it's fun. So take it away.
We have Maui Whale this week.
Not Merlin Crab or Mem Fox, but Maui Whale.
So this week at League, I was playing my opponent, and I played and I said fox, rabbit, and that player's dad was like, "Are you playing just animals?" I'm like, you know what? That's a perfect idea. We need to have an animal deck, and this gets us one step closer.
And that's funny you say that too, because we also got the Maui Soaring Demigod, which also could be like Maui Eagle or something if we wanted to call it that. Yeah. I mean, it's not, unfortunately, but I would love to see a bunch of forms of Maui now. With the fishhook out there already, I mean...
Mims, Merlins, Mauis.
Mauis, yeah. So, sorry, Maui Whale is a 7-cost inkable, 8 strength, 8 willpower, quests for 1, and you can finish it off there.
So, first ability is this mission is cursed. This character can't ready at the start of your turn. Second ability, I got your back. Pay 2 ink to ready this character. He can't quest for the rest of his turn. So, this card, at first glance, makes no sense.
How do you quest with him? If he can't ready at the start of your turn, and the only way to ready him says he can't quest.
I have no idea.
I know.
Is it you can't... Is it that you can just gain the lore off of, is it...
No, you have to quest with him still. There's got to be some interaction, but obviously, the point of that.
Dime?
I know. The only reason I threw that at you was because it is a brain teaser of sorts. But yeah, he's obviously not a quester. He's obviously a challenger. So with 8 strength, 8 willpower, he's
might as well give him no lore, make his stats stronger.
Yeah, at that point, honestly. But yeah, the 2 ink cost, I think, is kind of small to pay if you're trying to take out a beefy location, or if you're trying to take out something else really strong.
And you can do it multiple times within the same turn. You can ready him as many times as you want with that ink cost.
Yeah. So he from that respect, maybe Scar's a little bit better because he can just challenge, ready himself up, ready himself up. But he's also got 8 willpower, so he's going to live through a little bit more.
That's the thing that would be really interesting.
And it's inkable.
Is if he was cost less, had maybe 2 willpower, and he was just to take out locations because he'd take no damage.
Oh, that would be interesting. I like that a lot. But yeah, Maui Whale. I've seen this float around a little bit. I don't think it's the most impactful card of all time, but it's really fun.
I mean, of course, I mean, you can literally just be like, all right, I'm playing the whale.
Yeah. So Maui Whale. If you haven't played it, I will honestly, like, if you need ways to take out locations and you're considering your options, it's honestly not the worst option of all time.
You can also make him evasive for free with Fishhook.
Yeah, and then he interacts with Fishhook, which is crazy.
Yeah.
If for some reason you need 11 willpower, give him Challenger +3. Just at some point, maybe there'll be. I know there's a little bit of interaction with some of those other cards where they get more lore from, like having higher strength, like Pete from Chapter 2 in Emerald. Another fun interaction I just thought of would be with like Alice. He has
100%.
So, but anyways,
support.
Yeah. So yeah, Maui Whale. That's a good one. Okay, questions, comments from listeners. I don't have anything specific from any one in particular, but I do have a lot of polls / results and comments.
We don't have a Michael segment this week?
No, we don't, unfortunately, not right now. Nothing crazy happened. Just another run-of-the-mill unfortunate week. But that said, we do have comments and responses to our polls from our episodes on Spotify. And we do look and read all of those, and so I want to go through some of that because it's kind of fun to look at and see what people are thinking. And the first one is talks about the favorite meta, and it's just asking what everyone's favorite meta was in Chapter 1, 2, or 3. Unsurprisingly, I would say Chapter 2 has 0 votes. So nobody liked the Ruby Amethyst Goat bounce meta. But 75% of the vote is for Chapter 3.
Which, I think is fair because I think it's the most healthy meta we've had so far.
Yeah, I think it's really fun. I think the locations have made it very spicy and have definitely made it more difficult on some of the lines to play and in the way to, really be successful in it. But it also has made it very diverse and gives you the opportunity to really outplay your opponent. And so I think from that respect, it makes a lot of sense. And I guess I technically lied. It's 73%. With the rest of the 27% being in Chapter 1, which I think is fair. I think I like Chapter 1 more than Chapter 2 as well, and I think Chapter 3 is shaping up to be the best. So I think that makes a lot of sense.
I agree with the standings.
Yeah, and then we're talking, and then the question from that one is, how are your feelings about Chapter 3 meta thus far? So kind of in the same realm of there, trying to understand how people's thoughts and feelings are with the new set. And Adam, a usual or a regular, I guess, contributor to the podcast, has said that he loves the potential for theme decks now, which I think we're definitely, we've talked about that a ton as well. And the more and more characters that are released, there's more and more potential for that. We've got the dwarves, we've got Sword in the Stone with Mim and Fox. And I think just the amount of other characters we're getting from properties like Moana, talking about Maui Whale, there are just so much potential to have a very strong themed deck.
But we still need the big one, Big Hero 6. We
hey,
still need Big Hero 6.
I've barked up that tree enough. I don't need to continue to go into nauseam about that one because everybody would, I'm sure, get annoyed with me.
I've even thought how it works. You want me to go into it a little bit? I can go into it a little bit.
30 seconds, go.
Okay. Hero, no matter what the other members' inks are in, allows you to play whatever deck you have Hero in. All those cards can play in that deck.
I see where you're going, and that would be crazy.
Just the Big Hero 6 characters.
I guess that's not unprecedented because of, they do crazy stuff with the Dalmatian puppies, and so, why not make on the subtext of the Big Hero 6 characters say...
Fred, Go-Go, Honey Lemon could all be different inks, and you could play them within the same deck.
Yeah, and it, part of their ability can say, this can be played in any deck with Hero.
Yeah.
That'd be crazy. Yeah, I like that a lot, actually. Okay, last poll to talk about is, we said, what style of play are you playing in Chapter 3? Between aggro, control, mid-range, and tempo. And it's basically split down the middle. There's 27% aggro, 27% control, 27% mid-range, and 18% tempo. And so, again, the healthiness of the meta seems to really be shaping up. I think aggro, this one... is a little old now. I think that poll is a week and a half, maybe no, I think that one's 2 weeks old now. Aggro's died a little bit since then, so I'd be curious as to the people that voted for aggro, if that's still the case or not. But it's still very viable.
Mm-hmm.
I think with some of the Amber tools that we talked about on the tier list, and some of the other tools, and even Ruby, the new Simba Pinocchio, if anybody catches that reference, the new 2-cost uninkable 3 lore quester, and Ruby. Like there's potential out there for aggro still. I think that it's just not quite as consistent, and so it's not played quite as much. But the potential is still definitely there. So
100%.
Also, the Michael segment, the crazy stuff he does, crazy stuff he says, is in the news. What's on our mind league recap.
Oh, that's true.
Segment, and so not the comments, questions from listeners. But that being said, we do have to talk about some sort of news.
You don't have one? I got one.
Yeah, go for it. I shouldn't say I don't have anything. I said that very poorly, but yes, please go, because we do have stuff we want to talk about on this front.
The media team from Ravensburger has announced that on March 20th.
Which, unfortunately, I think this is going to go live after that.
I believe you're right.
March. Yeah, this is going to go live after that. So if you're listening to it, it has already happened. But not the potential, but the impact that this potentially has for the future on the way that they communicate with us is cool. So continue. Sorry.
So basically, we're getting like good old Nintendo Direct days. They're getting a Twitch stream. It's called Lorcast. Play on forecast, I would assume. And I guess it's going to be a stream that they're putting out where they're going to announce, I would assume, Chapter 4.
We assume that on the 20th that there will be the initial set of information released for Chapter 4. There's also potential for more like organized play announcements to come for the rest of the year. There's also potential for more concrete details on some of the like rulings and play around organized play, which are still up in the air on some stuff, but I think the direct line of communication and the Twitch stream and the live stuff, I know they've done a few things through Discord calls, but being that it's a more video-based platform on Twitch, there's the ability to very much more easily show some of the cards or show some of the rule sets and all of the things that come along with it. And so I really like the potential that this has for like a reoccurring thing.
Should we do a watch along?
What time is it on the 20th?
I don't know.
I mean, yeah, I think it's obviously going to depend because, depending on work and all that other fun stuff that has to go on in life.
Hey, look, we can figure it out. That's a possibility. We'll put that out there.
It's a potential. And especially like in the future, if we can, plan for it a little bit more ahead of time, then it's definitely something out there. But yeah, I think the idea of doing live streams like that to announce new pieces of information, whether it be organized play or whether it be set 4, whether it be future like Disney World interactions, whatever it is, I like the, to your point, the Nintendo Direct style of announcement.
The good old Nintendo Direct, not the new ones. The good stuff. 10 a.m.
So probably not live casting that one on a Wednesday, March 20th. But yes, if you are not like all up in the know on social media and all of the other stuff going on in the world, and you are listening to this episode, that will have happened by now, and so you can go find the news about everything that was released on that one. So yeah, cool stuff coming up and new announcements right around the corner from where we are, and probably already happened as to when this goes live. So
those playmats probably look incredible.
Those new playmats that they're going to announce / have announced already are fire.
Let's get it. Come on, please.
Okay, cool. Last one, and then we'll jump into the main episode. Your prediction / hope for a playmat.
Okay. I'm gonna. You know what? Because we got a tease in Chapter 2, and it has not been fulfilled yet. So I'm gonna say a Wreck-It Ralph mat, maybe a Vanellope Von Schweetz mat.
Okay, I like that a lot. That's definitely not the route I was thinking. I was torn between a couple of them. With all of the talk of puppies over the last couple episodes, I would just I don't care if it's Pluto. I don't care if it's.
What about Lady and the Tramp?
Yeah, I don't care if it's. That is, now we're cooking.
Yeah.
Now we're cooking. Throw in some Lady and the Tramp cards. Throw in Lady and the Tramp mat. Okay, you're on. I'm on board with that. Lady and the Tramp.
Go.
Now we're going. Now that's what I want. Lady and the Tramp mat. Okay. But with that said, let's jump into this. So again, we kind of wanted to just discuss the evolution of the inks and how their kind of identities have changed over the time. A lot of it's somewhat similar as from the start, but some of it has definitely changed as well. I think that understanding this can help you be a little bit better of a player because it helps you understand what your opponent's going up against or what you might be going up against with your opponent, but also helps you plan your own decks a little bit better.
And also, if you're new to Lorcana, it helps you understand the history, maybe.
Yeah, but also I think for us, and the reason we talked about this to begin with is because we've just come so far in these understandings as well. 100%. So jumping into this real quick, I think that just the example that makes the most sense is Amber. And when we initially talked about Amber, like way back when we did our chapter 1 tier list on season 1 of the podcast, it was like a healing. We said it's basically a healing meta. You know, you've got a lot of healers, you've got a lot of items that heal, you've got a lot of actions that heal. And that was like what we viewed a lot of the potential around, was keeping characters on board by, you know, going into favorable challenges and then potentially healing them to keep them on the board for even longer. I think that's changed a lot with this last set and even a little bit in set 2. And the change has been into the cheating the cost curve. Mm-hmm. So with Pluto, the, you know, 1 cost uninkable that lets you exert to take 1 cost of your next character, like that allows you to jump up to higher 2 and 3 cost characters faster. Same thing with Doc from chapter 2, who whenever he quests, he takes 1 ink off of the next character played. And the same thing with Lantern from chapter 1. You know, Lantern was kind of the only card in that realm. Mm-hmm. And now you've also got a beefed up Lantern in the Heart of Atlantis that takes 2 off of the next character played. It costs 4, and so that one doesn't see much play because it's very, very slow, and you have to take a really important turn to get it out on the board. Same thing with the Mickey Mouse from set 2. I can't remember the subtext on that one. I'm looking it up real quick, but he removes 3 ink requirements from the next character played.
So the bones have been there for
friendly face.
So the bones have always been there, and they've steadily added more.
Yes, and so it's a very full picture now. And so with all of that said, it leads very much to an aggro style, which we see a ton with Amber. You still see the Steel Song side of it, obviously, but there's a lot of aggro version of Amber as well. And to add on to that, the Steel Song side of it also cheats that cost curve, and you do that through none other than the singers. You know, there's more singers that have come out this set. Not all of them near as impactful as Ariel, obviously.
I believe it's Minnie Mouse.
You've got a Minnie Mouse,
musical artist, and Miss Bianca.
I think, I was gonna say it was Miss Bianca. That was my thought as well. Which are Singer 2, or Singer 3 and Singer 4. But yeah, so I think that again, you're cheating the cost curve of the cost of songs that you're playing because you can sing them before they're supposed to be able to be sung. So that's kind of the identity of Amber, is that doing things at a faster pace than they're meant to be done, which I like a lot. I think I like that style because you can catch people off guard. You know, if you're going into turn 3 or 4 with a Pluto and a Doc on board, you could get out a Mufasa early. If you're pairing it with Ruby, you can get out a Maui early. If you're pairing it with Steel, you can get out a Giant Tink early, or even a big Cinderella, Stout-Hearted, which can be shifted onto Singer Cinderella. And so I think there's a lot of play between those that have added to a lot of fun interactions, and really, in my mind, changed the identity, like probably more so than any other ink. But to your point, like the bones have always been there, and it's just really starting to get all of the tools to make that so.
I mean, chapter 1, it was really Rapunzel or nothing, and chapter 2 was Mufasa or nothing, and now it's a lot more versatile.
Yeah, I think the bones have again. I think there's a little bit of like flexibility you have, like the stitches, for instance. Rockstar Stitch and Surfer Stitch in chapter 1 were pretty impactful. They definitely died off quite a bit in chapter 2. I would say have seen some revival now. Mufasa, obviously one. We've talked about Perdita a few times, who has her own little like sub meta with the 2 cost characters and less. So I think that Amber, again, like cheating that cost curve and getting cheap stuff out, is very like identity driven now within the Amber set.
100%.
I think that kind of covers Amber. I mean, that one in my eyes has changed the most, which I think is cool to see, but it still feels very Amber. It's not like it has changed so much that it's like, this doesn't feel like what we started with. It's just has a much stronger connection now with a few of those things.
No, it's got, I mean, like we've talked about in the past, it's got all the right characters. The dogs fit perfectly with it.
The 7 Dwarves, we didn't even talk about them. They help,
absolutely.
Like with Snow White and the 7 Dwarves, that cheats all the cost curve too. So yeah, I mean, there's just so many options.
I mean, it's a really, like, they're usually, I mean, Perdita is one of the more expensive Amber cards we have, along with Chernabog. Like, if you look at the cost, like, there's not a lot of super expensive cards, relatively low cost.
Yeah, I mean, I think again in the aggro realm that you're playing, most likely playing, you have the cheap bodyguard, which is very very Amber as well. So yeah, I like Amber a lot now. It's not my play style. Again, I just think the consistency that I personally have had with it hasn't led me to have the most fun time ever. But I am a much bigger fan of the ink than when we initially started and we put it at like F tier and said it was terrible and left Rapunzel off of our tier list altogether. We've come along, Amber and we've come a long way since then.
100%.
But yeah, okay. I think from that we have to move on to your favorite amethyst. So I'll let you start here and take it away. And
I mean, has it been the GOAT from day one?
Pun intended or no pun intended?
Pun intended, 100%.
Okay. Yes. I mean, it's been a mainstay of the realm of Lorcana since day one for sure.
So I mean, in the very beginning, it was draw is king in Amethyst from chapter 1 on, day 1, chapter 1. It was, if you need to draw cards, which was very important and still is to this day, you played Amethyst.
And that's still the identity for sure. I think the difference is the way that you get there. And it has just seemed to get better and better and better. In chapter 1 it was Friends on the Other Side, which is still a staple obviously. Maleficent, which is honestly starting to see a little less play. I think she's still pretty solid play. The Maleficent Sorceress on turn 3. She's seeing a little bit less play. You also had Magic Mirror that was played a ton, and you also had the Queen, which you could exert to draw a card. And so those two have like fallen out of grace big time. They're done.
Completely.
And then in set 2, you had Rabbit, obviously. And so the Merlin Rabbit, draws a card when it's played, draws a card when it leaves play. And so it's guaranteed 2 cards, but if you bounce it yourself, then you're guaranteed 4 cards from it. And so just the amount of card draw that you can get from the Merlin Rabbits is insane. And then we also started to see the inklings of cards replacing themselves, which we've got a lot more this time. You've got, the Cusco Llama that replaces itself. Whenever it's banished, you get to draw a card. You've also got Jiminy Cricket, which says whenever you play this character, if you have a character named Pinocchio in play, you may draw a card. So a little bit of a caveat there, but you can draw off of like Jiminy as well, which there is a couple of Pinocchios that would make sense. And then you also have Hey Hey from chapter 2, which says whenever this character is banished in a challenge, you may return the card to your hand, which, if you just want to ink it after that, it's inkable, so that makes sense. And then lastly, getting into set 3, you've got Trinderbox Followers, which we talked about in the tier list episode, which replaces itself. Whenever he quests, you have the option to banish it to draw a card. You've got the Genie card that whenever he quests, you may shuffle him back into the deck to draw 3 more cards. Not super played, but I think a really fun card as well. And so just the options around card draw just continue to grow and be enormous within Amethyst.
Well, I would even say in chapter 2, like chapter 1, it was very much card draw, but in chapter 2, with a certain package that we all know and love, really evolved to the idea of keeping cards in your hand.
Yeah.
Which is with the bounce package.
Yep, that's a good point too.
With Merlin Goat, Merlin Rabbit, Madam Mim Fox, and Madam Mim Snake.
Yeah, and we I'd be remiss if I left out Queen's Castle. We have a location that draws now too.
Absolutely.
So Queen's Castle we talked about on the tier list. It's one of the best locations out there for sure. And anytime you have a character there at the start of your turn, you get to draw a card for said character. So the options out there. So again, identity and like the way that we view Amethyst is still the same, but it has really progressed in the options and the potential you have to draw the cards.
It's gotten even stronger. I mean, it works with any control deck. It keeps, those cards that are important to keep in control. It keeps them coming, which is really important.
Yeah.
It's a great combo with any deck, really. Amethyst.
You really can. You can go aggro with your Amber, and you'll have some cheap card draw with Friends on the Other Side and Rabbit. You can go control with Ruby, obviously. You can go Jafar Wheel, with Steel. The options are really pretty strong, no matter how you want to go. So
yeah.
The one thing I forget to mention in Amber, and I wanted to talk about, and we've consistently talked about in Amethyst here, is the evolution of card draw too. In Chapter 1, they're like, to your point, in Amethyst, like that was the card draw. Like there really wasn't much else. There was a whole new world and a few items where you could draw stuff off of, but not like a ton of consistent card draw outside of Amethyst. And then Rapunzel, from set 1, obviously drew off of the damage and, is still one of the staples of today. But every ink has started to get its own draw kind of synergies.
None to the extent of Amethyst.
No, but they all have their own
way.
But they all have their, yes, and it's very, it fits into their ink flair very well. So again, you draw a lot of healing or cheap characters like with Perdita or Mufasa and the replication from Amber. And Amethyst, again, it is the card draw, and so you can do it from playing characters, you can do it from playing items, you can do it from playing locations, you can do it from playing songs, you name it, you can draw from Amethyst. But I think that's the perfect time to jump into Emerald, which,
baby.
Again, has come a really long way. I think in set 1, the kind of disruption started to surface a little bit. I think it was also a little bit of an aggro tool because you had a lot of low cost questers.
I think it was the first hit of tempo, to be completely honest. Like,
yeah, I mean,
Emerald really was.
We definitely saw some tempo plays with like your Flynn Rider as well. And then in Chapter 2, we really started to see the inklings of like disruption with Bucky and John. And then, Sudden Chill definitely saw like a spike in use again. But I think in Chapter 3, we've really started to like fulfill that disruption identity. And I say that because you're not reliant on like one route to take. In Chapter 1, the only quote disruption you had was somebody having to challenge Flynn Rider to get rid of him, which would then cause you to discard a card. Same thing goes for like Cusco. Anytime you challenged and you banished him, your challenging character was banished as well. Same thing for like Cheshire Cat. And so there was some disruption on the way that you had to go about challenging characters. However, in Chapter 2, it started to get in the discard meta a little bit. And now in Chapter 3, you've got challenging characters. You have to discard cards. You've got Bucky and John that make you discard cards and draw cards. And now in Chapter 3, you've got a lot of the tools with Cloud Kicker and the Ursula to like really disrupt the board presence along with those discards to like really make the Emerald shenanigans whole.
No, I mean, honestly, like, it's crazy to look back at these inks and it's like, they were giving us hints all along.
For
like,
sure.
They were like, hey, this is a good piece. We're going to evolve it in the future.
It's like they knew what they were doing or something.
It's like they actually had a plan.
Yeah, they actually did have a plan. And we're starting to see that come to fruition. So again, like revisiting this and understanding the evolution of it is really like helping to see kind of what their thought process was.
I could see us doing this every 3 sets. Like, just...
It very well could. Again, I think the biggest thing with Emerald is, like, the core is very much the same like Amethyst, where it's very much about, like, disruption and trying to throw your opponent off of their plan. Genie on the Job is another one where it makes you bounce a character back to your hand, where it can really, like, change the way that you're trying to play out your next couple turns. It's like, okay, so if I'm an opponent playing Emerald and I have a plan to do this on my next turn and then this in 2 turns from now, Emerald has a plan, can have cards that completely disrupt that plan.
But it's also got some like really fun unique cards, like a one-off like morph kinda. It's got unique pieces that really work in anything, honestly. And,
that's a good point too.
I mean, I think as we go on, it needed like the first 2 chapters to get its legs, and then from here on out, I think it's going to be one of the strongest things in the game.
It could continue to be, yeah, because we've said that for a while now too, where like the tools were there, but it just didn't have like the full package. Like the full package seems to be there, and after we finished the tier list and everything was like S and A tier, it really kind of proves that out.
Yeah.
But yeah, so on the card draw side, when we started off, Emerald had Mad Hatter. Was that it? Which when he was challenged, you get to draw a card. Is that the only card draw in Emerald? Which again,
I'll double check, but I think you're right.
And then in Chapter 2, we had Prince John, which again, is a pretty solid one.
Yeah.
Which was anytime your opponent discards a card, you get to draw a card. And then like Hypnotize, which replaces itself. And so a few things like that are, semi-impactful, and they replace themselves, so they're okay cards. But now in Chapter 3, we've got Strike a Good Match, which is very Emerald because you draw 2 cards and then discard 1.
Yep.
And if you're singing that with Ursula, you get to draw 4 and discard 2. And so just, again, the options for draw, I think, have evolved a ton, which has made it very viable as well. And airfoil, anytime you play 2 actions, which again pairs really well with Ursula. And I actually had 2 copies of airfoil in my initial Emerald deck when I was trying to play test it to see if it was something I wanted to really pilot longer term or not. And so I think that was one of the biggest drawbacks in Emerald early on, was that there was just like 0 card draw in it. Mad Hatter wasn't guaranteed any card draw, and that was really the only option you had. And so now that you have actual real like playable options, inkable options as well, I think that Emerald's got some strong card draw to continue to refill your hand that keeps you going too.
Well, at least in the first 2 chapters, one of the big negatives to Emerald was how many uninkables there were.
That's a good point. I mean, as much as I hate to say it, that was an identity of Emerald, is that every strong card that it had was uninkable.
And I mean, it's still, it's flickered into the meta to this day, but it's not, I mean, there's a lot more pieces like Ursula, both Ursulas, they're both inkable. Kit is inkable.
Yeah.
So it's gotten a lot better at that. But at first, it was like, oh, all my 60 cards are uninkable in Emerald. And
it's very much like they wanted it to be the support ink and not the main ink, because it has to be the support ink, and you choose the support pieces from it because everything more or less is uninkable. But yeah, unfortunately, that was the identity of it. Cusco uninkable, Genie uninkable, which were 2 of the most impactful cards from Chapter 1. And then if we look at like Chapter 2, again, you have a lot of uninkables. Prince John, uninkable. Bucky is the exception there. He's inkable. But Flynn Rider, the Floodborn, his own biggest fan, uninkable. Lucifer, the Cunning Cat, also uninkable. Panic saw a little bit of play, also uninkable. Bibbidi Bobbidi Boo, also uninkable. So the point is, I can go on, but there's just so many uninkables that you really had to pick and choose, and you couldn't really get the whole package that you needed. But now with the Ursulas and Bucky and a couple of those other ones, you have plenty of inkable cards to go after in Emerald. Okay, I feel like we went on a ton about that one.
I mean, Emerald has come such a long way. It
really has.
It deserves time.
That's fair. Okay, so Ruby. Another one, I don't think there's a ton to say about Ruby, aside from it was very much a removal ink in the beginning. It has still one of the most impactful songs, being Be Prepared, in the game, that removes everything. It's basically a get out of jail free card, because if you're in a big trouble and you just play that, then you kind of reset yourself and you're in good footing again. You had Maui from set 1. You had Maleficent Monstrous Dragon from set 1, which are still probably 2 of the most impactful cards in the game. You've got Dragonfire, which still sees some play. And then moving into Chapter 2, you had Lady Tremaine, which was incredibly powerful. And then moving on to Chapter 3, again, referencing back to the tier list, we've got Madame Medusa and Prince Eric. And so the removal packages continue to evolve. And honestly, I think the removal packages from Ruby have just as big of an impact as anything else in the game as to what's played.
Honestly, yeah. I mean, Ruby has been like, from day one, it's been, we're going to take everything out and continue to play and do our thing. And that's basically what it's been. But it's just gotten stronger in that, and it's gotten more characters that do the banishing now.
Yeah, the character piece is important.
Huge. I mean, to be able to get that on playability, the super, like, advantageous on playability.
Yeah.
And then be able to quest the turn after with that same character. It's Tremaine and Medusa have changed the game.
Yeah, so. and genuinely too, because you started to see a lot bigger rise in 4 strength characters because of Madame Medusa. The Gaston Intellectual Powerhouse and Sapphire, I think, is one of the more important cards in the game right now, because it doesn't die to Madame Medusa and quests for 3. Same thing with Tamatoa. He was, kind of weak in Chapter 1, which I'm not going to jump into all the Sapphire stuff, but my point, like Tinkerbell Giant Fairy, there are a ton of cards out there that I think have even more life now because they don't get taken out for Madame Medusa.
Which is a huge credit to her.
Yeah, the point again initially to make that initial point was, Ruby sets the meta. Like they have a very, very
Every set.
large contribution to the way that the meta plays out because of the removal that's available to it.
Yes.
Fishhook, another one that's come out. It's not direct removal and it doesn't do anything, but the ability to turn after turn give cards 3 additional strength gives low cost, like 1 and 2 cost characters that don't have much strength to begin with, life later in the game because they can positively trade into higher cost cards. I really can't say enough about the Ruby stuff. Again, it has a very, very strong core identity of strong removal cards and evasive. The evasive piece, I think, again, is really important. One of the more important abilities in the game, and Maui Fishhook, gives everybody the ability to be evasive turn after turn. And so I think that we would be remiss without talking about evasiveness in Ruby a little bit.
No, for sure. I mean, it was a main, it's really where you got it from in Chapter 1 was all Ruby. So
little bit of Emerald,
little bit of
Emerald, little bit of Amethyst. Or actually, maybe the evasive didn't come until Chapter 2 with Amethyst. But yeah, I mean, Ruby was when you thought evasive, you thought Ruby, or I always have at least.
Yeah, I mean, I have to talk about one card before we move on from Ruby, and it was the rise and eventual fall of Heroic Outlaw.
It pains my heart.
It hurts so bad.
It pains my heart because I still will stick to that. It's one of, if not my favorite card in the game. I love it to death. It's one of my favorite cards.
To me, it's my original Charizard.
It really is.
Even though it's not the most expensive, I'm not saying that, but that card was just so iconic to me. I just love that card so much.
That was the most impactful card in the game. That's really tough to say because Rapunzel and Ursula and Be Prepared, but the change that could play, the 4 lore swing that it gives you was important in Chapter 1 as it was. And so yeah, I'm glad you brought that up because it's still one of my favorite cards too. And it's tough to see it go. But with that said, I got to talk about the card draw a little bit too because we have on the other ones. It's very Ruby as well. You have Sumerian Talisman from draw on your turn when challenged and banished.
That was Chapter 3 edition.
Chapter 3, you've got Chapter 2 with Dinner Bell that banishes your characters and draws off of their damage, which again, it is usually dealt through challenges. And so again, you have very much of a challenging mindset and removal mindset. And then lastly, Queen of Hearts, which again, anytime you're challenging, you get to draw a card. And so very much, again, that same realm of challenging, banishing,
yes.
And drawing off of that. And so again, the identity of that is very strong within Ruby.
No, I mean a lot of it's just like we said before with these other sneaky little additions that make sense at some point or another.
Add up over time. Okay, so Sapphire, taking the longtime listeners way back to the beginning, I said from the beginning Sapphire ramp was the coolest thing. And at the time, we were wrong because there was no card draw in Sapphire, just like these other ones. And so you could ramp really quick. You could ramp with Mickey, you could ramp with Tala, you could ramp with Fishbone Quill, but there was no true way to replenish your hand in Sapphire. And so you more times than not burn yourself out and then start to have to top deck or hold back a couple turns.
Or make the really unfortunate combo of Amethyst Sapphire, which didn't work at the time.
Yeah, and so to that point, the ramp was overhyped, is the way that I said it back then. And I agree, back then it definitely was. Because you just didn't have the ability to keep your hand full to continue ramping and to make it that impact. However, now, from Chapter 2, you have the Flavisham package with Popsicle.
Thank you.
And that's one of the most impactful combos in the game.
It took, like we've said multiple times in this podcast before, took the world of Lorcana by storm.
And I still think he has that impact.
He does.
He has the potential to draw more than any other card in the game. Even more than A Whole New World. A Whole New World, playing that's going to draw you 7 cards. If he, you play it, you banish an item, that's 2 cards. You quest, you banish another item, that's 4 cards. There have been times where Hiram has stayed on the board for more than 2 or 3 turns and has gotten you to that 6 to 8 card range of draw. And so with that ability that Hiram gives you, that ramp potential comes back and is way more impactful. And so
I mean, he was a huge addition to the ink overall.
the identity of Sapphire is still a little underwhelming. It's very item focused. All of that draw comes from the items. All of the ruby draw comes from the challenging. So in Sapphire, it's all item based, which I'm still trying to grasp a little bit. But I think it's a very strong ramp/item, kind of identity. And again, I think in the beginning, I wanted it to be ramp, but it didn't have the tools for that to really succeed very well. And so it was a little bit more item focused with like Ariel and Tamatoa. But again, even those characters now are way more impactful because the ramp can happen better.
I mean, it's been, I mean, I'll be honest, I would say from chapter 1, it's probably been my least favorite ink, just because I didn't fit my playstyle. But it's grown on me. It has some of the, there's a card from chapter 2, Alice. Like, that card,
Yeah.
I want that card to be so good.
Yeah, I'm still kind of shocked that one's not better than it is. The legendary, the chapter 2 legendary Alice. I think that, and that's, I mean, another, I think we've seen that a few times too, of characters granting all other characters on the board abilities.
It's done that multiple times.
You've got that with Cogsworth, you've got that with Alice, you've got that with Aurora. And so we didn't see that this set though, did we?
So we saw it with the Montanui, kinda.
Yeah, I mean, I think we can kind of fit that in. I think you've got a little bit with Montanui, but there's no characters that grant the rest of characters certain abilities. Everything is a lot more item based this time. You've got your Scrooge that deals well with items. You've got your inking with Tala, which I guess is a little, there. You've got Audrey Ramirez, which allows you to do player items twice.
So this right here, Vault Door, locations and characters gain resist +1. So a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, there are definitely options. And so, but anyways, very much ramping, very much item focused with a little bit of hint of like granting your other characters' abilities. I want Sapphire to be really good. I think it has the most potential. Ramp is the strongest ability in the game, I think, or mechanic, because if you can ramp to 10 ink, like if you have the ability to ramp to 10 ink and your opponent only has the ability to ramp to 5 ink, then you have the potential to just really outrun them from there. The caveat is, and it always has been, is you have to be able to card draw at the rate you're ramping, and that's the issue. Hiram, however, more or less fixes that. So,
I mean, yeah, your rate, like your draw rate, is a lot better than it ever was at this point.
Yeah.
Without Flavisham, I would say Sapphire is basically dead.
Yeah, I honestly, it's crazy to say that, but I kind of agree. I think without him, there's not near enough card draw for it to be viable, and if you having to rely on other inks just doesn't lend a good pairing. But with that said, the initial strong pairing was with Steel, and so we can jump into Steel, which I think still has a very strong identity too. But I also think it has one very specific non-direct damage identity that everybody is annoyed at, and we'll get to that one too if you haven't already figured it out. But direct damage is obviously its strong identity.
Yes, yeah.
We started off with Grab Your Swords, which is still to this day one of the most impactful.
Fire the Cannons, which doesn't see much play anymore.
Doesn't see a ton, but it still has potential. Just uninkable makes it not super viable because, again, you have to really be careful with your uninkables. Smash. And then in chapter 2 came the songs. We had Let the Storm Rage On and Strength of Raging Fire, which have seen a ton of life
from the Steel Song deck. Card draw.
Yeah, and so you have a little bit of card draw there. And then you've also got in chapter 3, Along Came Zeus, which I think gave it, which we talked about in the tier list episode. A lot of that other one is like chip damage here and there. Tinkerbell does some chip damage. You have some chip damage from characters like the Robin Hood from chapter 2 that can exert to deal 1 damage to a chosen character, but there was no like big heavy punch to a character. And so if you're playing Steel, the downside was usually that it's hard to like remove big bodies. Along Came Zeus does 5 damage to any character or location, and so that helps alleviate that need, but it's still very much a direct damage within the realm of its identity. And so it's very strong in that sense still, I think.
No, 100%. I mean, even like a small card like you said, Fire the Cannon's not viable anymore because of the uninkable. Well, they even added a little card like Baboom. Like they.
Oh, I forgot to mention Baboom. Yes, thank you.
Like and there's lots of little pieces like there's an interesting card in chapter 3, Captain Hook's Rapier.
Yep.
During your turn, whenever one of your characters banishes another character in a challenge, you may pay 1 to draw a card. So it has lots, like it has a little bit of everything.
When we didn't even mention like Sheriff of Nottingham, which anytime
100%.
you discard a card deals a damage. Chief Bogo from Chapter 2, which is anytime you play a Floodborn, deal 1 damage to every card on the board. So there's so many ways to deal chip damage in Steel. The micro identity of Steel, if you didn't get it from the hint I initially gave, was A Whole New World.
100% what it is.
A Whole New World is one of those cards that has incredible impact. You know, if you're going first, if you're on the play, and you have, your Robin Hood to shift turn 3, then, it's ink play, and then your hand's basically gone, and your opponent's only had, an opportunity to play an ink twice, so they've still got a relatively full hand. You just whip out that Whole New World, and then you're back to even with them, and it completely resets their game plan because they don't have the initial cards anymore. And so I think A Whole New World is like, its own play style because the wheel is insane.
No, I mean, it honestly, like you just said, it's its own play style.
Yeah, I mean, there are a few other items like Beast's Mirror and Captain Hook's Rapier and a few of those other like really niche card draw options in Steel, but A Whole New World will forever be its like card draw identity.
The second one I would say is probably Let the Storm Rage On. If there had to be a second.
For sure. I mean, it's really strong and got even stronger with Ursula being able to double sing it and draw twice off of it. But that obviously requires the cooperation of another ink.
Absolutely.
And so not getting super deep into that one, but yes, Let the Storm Rage On is definitely the second most impactful card draw. However, A Whole New World, when played correctly, is nuts. The one downside is that obviously there can be times where you're stuck with it and you don't have an option but to play it, but it helps your opponent as well. And so, that's the give and take of A Whole New World. But if you're a good wheel player, it's very, very difficult to play.
Yes, it is.
So that's the inks. I mean, quick recap here. We've got Amber, which was, very heel driven from the beginning, which has come very much like Cheat the Curve driven now, very singer focused, obviously. Amethyst, which was very spell/song driven draw. I think it's turned into a very character driven draw now with your rabbit and so forth. Moving on to Emerald, we have the hand and opponent disruption, which is very strong to where it started. However, the like full thought out nature of Emerald to begin with was nowhere near what it is today. And so the biggest change that it's seen is its viability. Early on it was very, very limited in its identity, and now it's like fully fledged out. Ruby again is like Amethyst, I think the most strongest identity that it's stuck to and just really evolved the meta with all the direct removal, spells and characters with on-play abilities. The ramp from Sapphire again, I think it was the intended identity early on, but it wasn't really there because it didn't have the tools to continue the draw. And so I think Aurora was probably the biggest identity from Chapter 1, is that it gave everybody else the ability of whatever, you had a character that gave everybody else an ability. And Cogsworth in Chapter 2 started to do that as well. But now, at the end of Chapter 2 and beginning of Chapter 3, with all the Flavisham and the draw, the ramp is really back to the forefront because of the draw ability to keep up with the inking. And so finally, moving on to Steel and the direct damage, I think that was always the identity. But I think, in tandem or in hand to hand now, when people think of Steel, they think of direct damage, a lot of fun damage dealing combos like Giant Tinkerbell and Grab Your Swords, but the second thing that comes to people's minds right after that is A Whole New World for sure.
Yes, 100%.
So I think that hopefully that kind of helps clear some of that up and some of the changes. I mean, Amber definitely, again, for the 100th time, the biggest
comeback story.
Yeah, the biggest comeback as far as like what it's turned into. You have the strongest, brand identities, if you will, from the beginning. I think in Ruby and Amethyst, and then in between all of that, you have Sapphire and Steel that have had strong identities the whole time, but have had their kind of packages really filled out. And then lastly, but not least anymore, would be Emerald, and it had little identity at the beginning. And we saw where it was going in chapter 2, and now in chapter 3, like, we see what the whole plan was.
Yep.
So,
I mean, honestly, I think it does a lot of help to little every point to go back and just look at all this stuff and like, okay, this is where we were square one. Now we're at plan. We're at this point now.
Yeah, I don't know where they're taking it necessarily now. Like, I feel like with locations, there could be a lot of different opportunities, but. We've talked about this in the past too, like breathing life into new or breathing new life into old cards.
And who knows what they just revealed with the chapter 3 that we have.
The chapter 4.
Chapter 4, yeah.
That we're talking about this before, they said, yeah.
That we know happened when this episode released. So
yes.
Yeah,
so, but no, I hear you. I think it's cool to like go back and to see old cards get new life, which we've talked about as well. I mean, even cards that were really good at one time that fell out of grace that are even back now, like Rockstar Stitch. Mm-hmm. I mean, it was crazy set 1, didn't see a ton of play set 2, and it's back pretty strong now in set 3. So yeah, it's really cool to just see the evolution and again, like understand the impacts that each of those have. And again, understanding the biggest takeaway I can like try to give to everybody listening to this is Ruby sets the pace, like genuinely.
Yes.
As much as you want to admit it or not, the removal from Ruby sets the pace. The Lady Tremaines were the biggest impact in Chapter 2. You couldn't just have one card on the board because she'd remove it. So you'd always have to have a small cost card to play on there to protect against the Lady Tremaine. Now Madame Medusa is setting the stage with the 3 strength and less, and if you have that, then you know that's going to get removed. And so Ruby is constantly changing the way that you have to think about it because of its removal. And so, yes, if you're wanting to get into studying the game, look at the Ruby removal and understand the abilities that it has, because the Ruby capabilities really drive forward a lot of the other strengths/weaknesses of other cards.
100%. I mean, Ruby, as long as it keeps going like this, it will continue to dictate the game.
All right, last question, and I think we've talked about this a couple times, but since we're on like the evolution of the inks and how everything is playing, at what point do they reset everything and like say all of these cards that have been released are now legacy and going forward you can only play new cards? Is that like every couple years? Is it every 5 years? Do they never do that? Like how?
I would say 3 to 4 years from here.
Yeah, I was initially like in the Pokemon realm where it was like every set, which would be like every 2 years. The more I play and the more I understand and listen to other people talk about other TCGs, I think it probably has a little bit more legs than that. But I think at some point it would make sense to like give a clean slate and like really start over, because
that's kind of sad to think about.
Yeah,
I've invested a lot.
I know. But anyways, yeah. So that's just a little teaser to end this with, and I'm sure when we start talking about the rest of the year and next year, that'll pop back up. But as always, everyone, thanks for listening. I hope you learned something. I hope this was a good listen for you, and we appreciate all the support as always. And we will catch you next time.
All right, bye guys.